We have started Article 1 of the United States Constitution. You're going to have to be able to tell me on a test what are the aspects of Article 1. Article 1 addresses the legislative department. There's three functions of government: lawmaking, executive, and judicial. Our form of government is split into three departments, or splits the three departments, three functions of government, into three different branches controlled by three different groups of people. The reason our government is split up into three functions, or split up into three departments performing three different functions, is because of a term called, somebody? No. L. Starts with an L. Libido dominante. The lust to dominate. It is because of that natural tendency of human beings to dominate over other people, our founders understood you could not have all three functions of government and properly protect what? The people's natural rights without having a check and balance on the power. So the first attempt at this, the first aspect, is having a lawmaking branch that we call the legislative branch. The federal government's legislative branch is made up of a bicameral House and Senate, or a bicameral body, made up of the House of Representatives and the Senate. We have already covered the House, we've covered the Senate. You'll need to go to my website and get the notes. I'm planning on coming in this weekend to re-record yesterday's lecture so that we can get that up this weekend as well. We're going to address the authority or the power that has been granted to the Senate. It's been granted by who? The people through?
Voting.
No. Say again. Mia, say again. No, not rights. I thought you said something else. I was going to say, wow. Huh? Nope.
Senator?
Nope. Nope.
What did he say?
Who has granted the federal government, and in particular the Senate, with certain enumerated powers? Nope. Go back to 101. Go back to the basics. No, not the Constitution. Who wrote the Constitution? The states. We, the people of the representative states, ordained the Constitution. The states delegated their authority onto the Senate to do certain functions.
But now they've just taken over all of it.
Now the Senate operates as if it's not delegated power. Now this is important because this justifies, in the Southern government's view, prior to 1861, why they are allowed to withdraw from the Union. But did they have a constitutional right to do so?
Yes.
Yes, they did.
Just like California is trying.
Well, I don't know that California has the right to. Idaho does not, unless it changes its constitution. But it was admitted into the Union with the promise in the Constitution that we will forever be part of the Union, that we will never leave the Union. In fact, after the Civil War, every state that came into the Union had to guarantee that. So any state that came in after the Civil War has to have that provision. So we made a promise, our founders made a promise to the federal government, we would never leave the Union. Therefore, while the people of Idaho could change the Constitution, the Idaho Constitution, there's still a problem because Idaho was admitted into under a certain understanding. Well, all of these states came under the authority of the U.S. Constitution with a certain understanding that they could leave whenever they felt like the federal government was destructive to their inalienable rights. And that's what happens in 1860 and 1861. Yes?
Well, why doesn't California just leave?
Because I don't know if they have a provision that prevents them. I doubt, because it was before the Civil War, but they get so much federal money, why would they want to do that?
Well, I saw this thing that they're trying to get signatures.
Yes, they are trying, or have tried. Yeah, but a lot of people like to have that, like Texas. They like to talk a good talk, but they're not going to do that. All right. Some of the enumerated powers. They provide advice and consent on federal appointments. We've seen that process occur with the Supreme Court Justice nomination, Brett Kavanaugh, last fall. The president gets to nominate the Supreme Court Justice, and the Senate gets to consent to that appointment. And that's what they were trying to do. The Democrats were trying to stop, not give consent, while the Republicans were trying to provide it. Eventually, the majority won. Some Democrat senators and I believe all of the Republican senators voted to confirm him, and he's on the bench now. That goes for our new FBI director. He had to go through a consent process. He was nominated by the president and consented to by the Senate. And therefore, because that is a position served at the pleasure of the president can also fire that person, which is what happened to the previous guy, Jeff Sessions. He was actually asked to resign, so he did. The previous guy before that was James Comey, and he was fired. And we now know why, and that is he was behind the Russia hoax against President Trump. Yes, that's kind of a derogatory term for the investigation that's been going on. So you need to do a Google search then. It's all over the news.
Russia saying they were going to nuke us?
Nope. The Russia hoax is the idea that candidate Trump worked with the Russians to defeat Hillary.
He didn't, though.
There's no evidence. Even the FBI says there's no evidence, but they still try to prosecute.
Didn't they do the investigation like 3 times?
And they're still investigating. We'll be discussing abuse of government power a little bit later in this course.
I got in an argument yesterday with some girl on Facebook because she said that Trump's a horrible president and that Obama was a good president.
I saw that.
I
Well,
was like, B-word?
well, just tell her prove it. Based on what?
And no. And I
They
told
weren't even
them,
using
they
her
started
facts.
saying that I was getting mad at them or whatever. And I was like, I'm not getting mad. I'm just chilling. I'm just saying, where'd you do your research at?
Yeah.
You do a little bit of research. And she's like, well, maybe if you weren't so conceited, this and that. And like, she started going, I was like, what the heck? I'm not saying anything.
Well,
bad. I'm just saying.
this is what is now termed in politics Trump derangement syndrome.
All I said, I was like, Trump just has a bad name for himself, dude. But
Yeah.
like, if he didn't have that bad name, you guys would see all the good shit he does.
Yeah.
And
Well,
just stay quiet.
to be fair to President Obama, I'm sure if we was to really examine some of the things that he pushed, we could say there were some good things.
There was some good things.
There was some good
Not
things.
all
He had
of
good
them.
intentions.
Not all good things he did were good.
Right, exactly. So it's not a bash on Obama and build up Trump. There's no president that does.
Has been perfect.
That's right. There isn't, and there never will be. But we certainly can't argue about the economic recovery that we've had. I mean, hands down, it's the.
The best
Oh, it's
in like
huge.
50 years.
Yes, that's right. So best ever in my life. The minority groups in America has fared much better than they have. African Americans or Americans of African ancestry, they have the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years.
Yeah, and African Americans are the ones that always are unemployed.
Yep, exactly. All right, so the Senate also ratifies all treaties with a 2/3 vote. So the president may negotiate a treaty, but it cannot go into law until the Senate ratifies it. Now remember, these are reserved powers for the Senate. The House does not do this.
Doesn't the House have the power of the court now?
Yes, that's what makes them just slightly more powerful. They have it's called power of the purse. They control the finances.
So they get to say what we need to spend it all on?
Yeah, all the House has to do is not provide funding, which is what they did for the wall. They passed the legislation for the wall 15 years ago, or even more, but they didn't provide funding for it. All right, and they also have the sole power to convict and remove from office federal appointments and the president only for high crimes and misdemeanors. That's very important because as we continue to hear about impeaching President Trump, that is only an indictment. That is not proof he did anything.
But once they have an indictment,
It will go to trial. You will see the news.
It means that they actually do have evidence.
It's the way the evidence is presented. See,
The feds don't step in unless they're solid, and you're most likely proven guilty with the feds.
the FBI and all of that does not do that with the president. It's only the House. The House will do the impeachment investigation. Here's the problem with indictments, not only with a civil indictment that we're talking about here or an impeachment. You don't get to defend yourself during an impeachment.
No?
Nope, no defense. You don't get to defend yourself. The only time you get to defend yourself is if you are impeached and it goes to trial at the Senate. Then you get to defend yourself. President Clinton was impeached when he was president. He was not convicted because he was able to provide evidence and convince enough Democrat senators to keep him in office. Even though he was charged with lying to FBI investigators, and there was something else he was charged with. He had two felonies. He pled guilty to it. He lost his law license, had to pay a huge fine, but yet the Senate still did not remove him from office.
Really?
Yep. So you can be impeached, but not be removed from office. Ironically, most federal officers who are removed from office are actually judges for corruption. I did a quick search on that, and it's almost always, there's very few senators that's been removed from office, very few federal officers other than judges. There's only been 2 presidents impeached. President Johnson in 1863, I believe. And no, that's a different Johnson. And President, because the radical Republicans didn't like him, so they tried to get rid of him. It's kind of like what they're doing to Trump. And President Bill Clinton was impeached, but neither one of them was removed from office. All right. And finally, or at least on this slide, they vote on all legislation approved by the House. This is part of the checks and balance. The House is passing a bunch of what would be considered left-wing legislation right now. But it's not getting past the Senate. That's part of the check and balance that our system is set up. All legislation must be approved by the Senate. So not just the House. Likewise, if the Senate introduces new legislation, the House has to approve it as well. So they have a check against each other so they don't get too powerful. All right, they also can filibuster, what's called filibuster. A single senator can block the passage of legislation by filibustering. 3/5 of the roll call vote is what it would take for closure. So you can have somebody stand up there for 24, 48. I think Strom Thurmond was the longest running filibustering senator. I think back in the 50s, where I think he went 50 some odd hours of nonstop talking about the bill. And so what happens is you keep talking until the clock runs out. And if you can do that, then you can defeat the bill. At that time, they would have hooked up because you got to think about this. You got to drink. They can bring you water, but you cannot leave for the bathroom. You guys can't get through a period without going to use the commode. These guys have to go hours. We had a Senator Cruz, just I think 2 years ago, spent I think 12 or 18 hours filibustering. He refused to do what Strom Thurmond did and what other senators.
12 hours.
Huh? Yes. Nonstop. Yep. He read Dr. Seuss nursery rhyme to his kids on TV, putting them to bed. But how some of these senators would go so long without having to go to the bathroom, they'd hook up a device like truckers might use. And they just go and urinate right there, and there's a bag on their leg.
A catheter.
Kind of like a catheter, but it's not
They
inserted.
tried to put one of those in the hospital on me. I denied it. I started swinging my fist and everything. I was like, nope, I'll stand up and go to the bathroom myself.
Anyways, that is how, but he did not, and he actually said the reason he had to stop is he had to go to the bathroom. That's what I had heard on the news. But the old time senators would have hooked up and they could have gone on and on and on. I guess they just better not eat.
Instead of a catheter, do they have a bucket as well?
Not a bucket, no, because they would just have it hooked up inside their britches.
I'll be sitting next to you tomorrow, bro. Don't trip.
All right. So let's take a look at the structure of the Senate. Like the House, most work is completed in the committees. And like the House, majority of the committee members represent the majority party. Which tells you the committees pretty much pass whatever the party line is. Now, the Democrats have some conservative members of the House, Democrats who do cross party lines and vote more conservative. So that does happen once in a while, but it's getting far and far between. The divide's just getting wider and wider between the two groups.
It's all the socialism.
Well, there's part of that. And the chair of each committee is a member of the majority party. So in the House of Representatives, all of the investigation that was being done into the FBI shenanigans, why they didn't indict Hillary Clinton when they know she was guilty for for sending classified emails over unsecured email servers, and deleting all those emails, and how they started investigating President Trump. That investigation has stopped because the Democrats now control that committee, and they've now reversed the investigation, and instead of investigating into the FBI, they're investigating into Trump now. The Senate, however, has picked it up and continued on with the investigation. So all of this is very political in how they operate. So you don't have to write these down, but like the House, the Senate can establish or dissolve committees and subcommittees as the circumstance warrants. There are many special committees and subcommittees. Like in the House, one of the most powerful standing committees is the Appropriations, which controls the actual dispensal of funds. So you can guess roughly, pretty close, what these different committees do just by their names. Lots and lots of committees. And for example, somebody from Idaho, they might be very interested in the Agriculture Committee because of all the agriculture business we have in Idaho. Or natural resources. We have lots of natural resources here. Let's see here. If they're in the Midwest, you certainly would want to be on the Agriculture Committee. If you're say your area is like New York City, that's the financial capital of the world and of the United States, you'd probably want to be on the Finance Committee. Foreign relations, if your expertise or you're strong in foreign relations, you'll probably want to be on that committee.
Is it Unit 1 or Unit 2, Moffitt?
I don't remember. I'll have to help you out. All right. So that is the end of this section here.